to, we'll talk about the career as vet. It's so hard to say it. I'll just say vet. And we have Dr. Berzek to talk about her career and the program at PCC. But before that, let's do a little housekeeping. As you know, you have to check in so your teacher knows that you're here. And if you have a questions, these are the great question document that you can reference to. And the evaluation form, this is where you need to do this right after the event. So everything is still fresh, and always put on mute so that we don't distract everybody and we don't distract the presenter. If you have question, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. If all this, if the QR code doesn't work, then we have the link. We have the bit.ly link, put in the chat, and also the actual link, because we just found out that some computer does not work. The bit.ly link doesn't work. And you can actually turn on your camera so that Dr. Berzek can see you. You will not be on the recording. Be fully present, pay attention so you can ask questions. And the evaluation form. Again, this is very important. Do this right after the event, because this is how we track your attendance, and this is how we can give you credit. And this is a requirement for you to graduate. And that would be the high school students. And that is it for me.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for having me here today. And I'm excited to be here. I'm Dr. Berzek, and I am the director of the Vet Tech program at Portland Community College. So today I'll talk to you a little bit about veterinary technology, but I'm going to really just try to concentrate on veterinary medicine generally, because I know there is just interest in veterinary medicine generally. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the career paths you can take in vet med. I will have my chat. I think I can get my screens situated here so I can have my chat up. So feel free to put some questions in the chat, and then we'll make some time at the end for questions as well. Can everybody see my screen? Yep. Okay, perfect. So, veterinary technology is the program that I am a part of at Portland Community College, and vet techs are the quickest way to summarize it are basically like a nurse in veterinary medicine. So if you think about the human equivalent of a doctor and a nurse, vet techs are like the nurse in veterinary medicine, and the veterinarian is the doctor. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. First, I'll give you a little bit of information about myself. So I grew up in Bend, Oregon, when it was very, very small, a very tiny little town, and no one knew about it. And I grew up riding horses, and horses were my whole life. That was like what I did every day, all the time. I was out at the barn playing, grooming, whatever it was, doing anything with horses. So they played a really important role in my life and in my upbringing, and kind of helped me get through some challenging times in my life. So that sort of set the stage for kind of where I wanted to go long term. And so really early in, probably in about middle school, I was telling people that I wanted to be a veterinarian, not having any idea what a veterinarian did or anything like that. And then, got through high school, graduated from high school, and went to college at Oregon State University down here in the lower part of the screen there, and was an animal sciences major at Oregon State pre-vet. And, still my intention was to go to vet school. And I applied to vet school at Oregon State and a few other colleges my first year. So you apply your senior year of undergraduate, and then you would start theoretically after that. And I didn't get in, and I was so disappointed. I was really really devastated. I didn't know what I was going to do. I hadn't had a backup plan. I had always just assumed like I'll get into vet school, not thinking about the fact.
Sorry, Dr. Borzak, I just accidentally muted you.
Okay. So not having thought about the fact that vet school was challenging to get into and I might not get into it. So I really struggled after not having been accepted into school the first year, and tried to figure out what I was going to do with my degree and where else I could go. And did I want to continue trying to pursue this? You know, I didn't get in the first time. Should I just give up? And, you know, talked to a lot of friends and family, did a lot of thinking, and decided that I would apply again the next year. So I applied again the next year. So I took basically a year off, and worked and kind of saved up money. And the next year I got into Oregon State, but only as a like an alternate. So if someone else in the program didn't take their spot, then I would get in, but otherwise I couldn't go. But I also got accepted to a school in Scotland, a veterinary school in Scotland that I had sort of applied to on a whim, not thinking really anything of it, not knowing about Scotland at all. And I ended up getting into that school. So it actually ended up being, it's the University of Glasgow, which is pictured here. And I think, I haven't seen the Hogwarts films, but apparently this is the castle in Hogwarts, the school. And this is where I took my final exams. So I obviously went to that school in Scotland. It was a crazy experience. It was really fun and really interesting. And yeah, taking final exams in a building like this was like both intimidating and also super, super cool. So I spent a year there, quickly realized at that time, the exchange rate for the dollar to the pound was like 50%. So I would like go and bring my, my check from, in dollars to the bank in Scotland, and they would give me half of the money back of what I had just given them. And I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna run out of money here real quick. So I started getting into contact with Oregon State University and seeing if they would be interested in letting me transfer back to their school. I had gotten really, really good grades in Glasgow, and I sort of showed those to them and said, hey, look, like, this is what I can do. Do you want to accept me back? And they ended up accepting me back as a transfer student. So I transferred back to OSU into the vet school there. And that's where I finished my veterinary training, was at Oregon State University. It's now called the Carlson College of Veterinary Medicine down in Corvallis. And I had a great experience there. I really enjoyed my professors and my time there. At that school, you are trained on all species. So you learn about dogs and cats and horses and rabbits and cows and all different species, because theoretically, when you graduate, you could be practicing on any species. So none of you will be surprised if you heard the start of my my talk here that I was dead set on practicing equine medicine, and I was going to treat horses, and that was all that I was going to do. So so that's a little bit about me, and I'll share a little bit later too, because my story changes a little bit as I went into my career. So, what is veterinary medicine? And I think a lot of people think of veterinary medicine as, let me go into that a little bit later. First, let's talk about the two main roles, the certified roles that you can work in a veterinary clinic, in a veterinary setting, are a veterinary technician or a veterinarian. And what is the difference between those? First of all, a veterinary technician, like I said earlier, is kind of like the veterinary nurse. So they do a lot of restraint. So not similar to human medicine, we actually have to restrain our animals, although I guess in pediatrics, there's some restraint in human medicine, but most dogs and cats and horses and cows won't just willingly sort of put their arm out and allow you to draw blood. So lots of restraint. And we try to do that in a way in which we're not holding the animal down and forcing them to do these things, but in a more gentle, and the terminology in the industry now is fear-free. So some of you who have animals may have been in clinics that are fear-free, and they do make extra efforts to sort of make those experiences that we can't, verbalize to the animal, like we need to draw blood because you're sick and we need to figure out what's going on. We try to make those less fearful for them. So restraint is a really important part. General nursing care, so doing physical exams, taking a temperature, pulse, and respiration, writing up medical records, lots and lots of client communication. So I will have people sometimes that are like, I can't stand people, so I want to become, a vet tech or a veterinarian. And that is a really common but bad mistake to make, because every animal comes in with an owner. Typically, there are a few settings where there's not an animal attached to, or not an owner attached to an animal, but most times there's going to be an owner attached to that animal, and an owner who wants to know what's going on. Why is my animal sick? Why does this cost so much? What is this test that you're trying to run? What is it going to tell me? So there is a lot of client communication that happens. There are also laboratory technicians. So whereas in human medicine, you might go to a phlebotomist to get your blood drawn, in veterinary medicine, the veterinary technician is the one who's doing that. So drawing blood, getting urine samples, getting fecal samples, sometimes getting tissue samples. They're also dental technicians or dental hygienists. So, whereas in human medicine, we would go to a dentist's office and see a dental hygienist who would do all of our teeth cleaning. That's done by the veterinary technician in the veterinary world. They're also a radiology and ultrasound technician. So again, where we would go to a separately trained human person, veterinary technicians are doing a lot of the imaging in veterinary medicine. They also run anesthesia. So that's where, we are giving an animal medications that kind of make them sleep for a little while so that we can do surgery on them, or, different procedures that might need to be done. And they scrub into surgery sometimes with the veterinarian. So, they get into sterile gloves and sterile gown, and they assist the veterinarian in the procedure. So the veterinary technician, we oftentimes will refer to them as like our right and left hand in the clinic. They are so important to making sure that the clinic is running smoothly. They sort of have their finger on the pulse of everything that's happening in the clinic, literally and figuratively in some cases. So they're such an important part, kind of that glue that holds the clinic together. And then the veterinarian, what does the veterinarian do? So the veterinarian's the doctor in this scenario, if we're going to compare that to like human medicine. And there are actually only 3 things that the veterinarian can do that no one else in the practice can do. And that is to diagnose an animal with a disease, to say to an owner, we have run all these tests and we've done all these things, and your animal has diabetes or something like that. Only the veterinarian can do that. They're the only one who can do surgery. And they're also the only one who can prescribe medications. So something to think about, it is as you start to learn more about yourself and what you like to do, or as you start to think about yourself and what you like to do and where you might see yourself in a career, what sorts of things, what sorts of things are rewarding to you. And if you're looking at yourself and you're like, I love, doing surgery, or I think I'm going to love doing surgery, right? Then the veterinarian might be more the route you want to go. But if you're sort of someone who sort of likes to have their fingers in a lot of different pots and be doing a lot of different things and kind of helping things run and staying busy throughout the day, I guess we're both busy, veterinarians and vet techs, but then a vet tech may be something that you may want to do. And, if you're interested in this career, I definitely encourage you to spend some time in a veterinary clinic and then watch those different roles and talk to those different people and say, what do you like about your job, veterinarian? What do you not like about your job, veterinarian? What do you like about your job, vet tech? What do you not like about your job, vet tech? And start to understand the differences between those, because they are actually very different roles within the clinic and careers generally. So in the state of Oregon, quick, thing on nomenclature. In the state of Oregon, graduates of vet tech programs in Oregon become certified veterinary technicians. Depending on the state, they may also be licensed or registered vet techs, and that's what LVT and RVT stand for on this slide. So it doesn't mean anything except for a different name. It's the exact same degree, it's the exact same license, you do the exact same things. It's a nomenclature thing that actually the industry is trying to fix currently. So I have a couple pictures here about, veterinary nursing. The cool thing about nursing is that we don't just treat one species. So, we have dogs and cats, sure, and we have examples of restraint here and client communication here, but we also have, here is a cat in the ICU in the intensive care unit getting treated. And then here is a baby foal in the intensive care unit getting treated. So we're going to see similar disease processes and similar, hospitalizations and medical treatments for a variety of species. And then, we also get to see these really unique species that most people don't ever get contact with, like giraffes and elephants and other exotic animals like that. This is going back to the, as veterinary technicians being phlebotomists, they need to know how to draw blood from a cat and from a cow and from a horse and from a snake and from a rat and from all these different species. And then we take that blood and we make what's called a blood smear, which you see these two slides right here. That's a blood smear. And then we look at that under the microscope and we count those cells and we look at those and say, how many of these cells are normal? How many of these cells are abnormal? Are there too many? Are there too few? And that gives us a lot of information about what could be going on systemically with the animal, because all of those cells are fluctuating depending on the disease state of the animal. Dentistry, so a really important part of what vet techs do. And this is a great before and after picture here of before. You guys, anyone who's had a dog who has doggy breath can probably smell what that mouth smells like. It just smells terrible. And then we get all that disgusting, plaque and tartar off, and these teeth look beautiful. Another really important part of dentistry is actually taking radiographs, and technicians are really important with that. My technicians are the ones who can get these teeth radiographs almost every time. The angles are really hard because the roots actually go way up underneath the gum line. So it can be really challenging to get the entire root in there, but it's really important to get the entire root in there because that's really the integrity of the tooth. So, this after dental picture, I could look at that and say, yeah, that's beautiful. It looks beautiful externally, but unless we have radiographs of all of those roots, I cannot tell that owner whether or not these teeth are healthy. We have to see the roots in order to say that those teeth are healthy and that the animal will be fine. And so just like the dental hygienist does in your own mouth, when you go to the dentist, they're probing for pockets, they're evaluating for abnormalities, and then they're cleaning, scaling, and polishing the teeth. Imaging, so radiographs, and again, we're doing this in all different species. We have x-rays here of horses and dogs, and then we have an example of ultrasound here, probably ultrasounding for a bladder in order to get a urine sample. Anesthesia is a huge part of what veterinary technicians are trained to do and what veterinarians and veterinary technicians do generally. So, this is, I always sort of talk about it as like this fine line between life and death, because if you give the animal too much anesthetic medication, they can die. And if you have them too light, they're going to feel whatever you're doing, whatever painful procedure you're doing, and they're going to maybe wake up on the table, which is certainly not something you want to have happen with this lower picture here, the lion, right? We don't want that lion waking up on the table and jumping off the table in the middle of the procedure that they're doing. So it's really important that technicians understand what they're doing and how to do it. Surgical nurse, so scrubbing into surgery on the left-hand side here, you can see this person is sterile and ready to pass instrumentation, but also preparing the animal, putting the endotracheal tube in so that the animal can be delivered the medication that helps keep them anesthetized, sleeping while the procedure is being done, preparing the surgical site, making sure that it's sterile and prepared properly so that there's no post-surgical infections or anything like that. So veterinarian or a veterinary technician, what does the education look like for each of these? So a veterinary technician is a 2-year degree. There are some 4-year degrees. I think there's about 5 in the United States. And those are going to be a 4-year bachelor's degree. But most programs, the vast majority, are 2-year degree programs. And that is what our program is at Portland Community College. And the cost of our program at PCC is about $12,000 for the entire 2 years. Some of our students do come into our program with the intention to go to vet school eventually. So it's not necessarily a common way to move through, becoming a veterinarian, but I would also say it's not uncommon. We probably have 1 or 2 students a year who have the intention of applying for vet school after they become a veterinary technician. And then as a vet tech, you can also specialize. So specialization is where, you decide that maybe you're really interested in surgery, or you're really interested in emergency medicine, or you're really interested in behavior. Then you could specialize as a veterinary technician in one of those areas. And I'll put into the chat here in just a second the link to the specialization websites. As a veterinarian, what does your education look? So as a veterinarian, you actually need 4 years of undergraduate studies. So as a vet tech, you could theoretically come right out of high school and move into your two-year degree. As a veterinarian, you're going to need to go to college and get a 4-year undergraduate. And I don't have data on undergraduate prices just because it's so variable. If you do a couple years at a community college and then the rest at a 4-year university, or if you go private or public, that can be variable. But just know that part of the cost as to become a veterinarian is going to include a bachelor's degree, so 4 years of undergraduate studies. And then you, on top of that, need 4 years of veterinary school. And veterinary school ranges pretty wide here, but somewhere between $150,000 to $300,000 for the full 4 years of education. There was a study in 2019 done by the American Veterinary Medical Association, and they found that the average debt of graduating veterinarians was about $165,000. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how much it does cost to go to vet school, because that's what most students are graduating needing to pay back in loans. Veterinarians can specialize as well. They actually have to go back to school, though, in order to specialize. They don't have as easy of a time like a veterinary technician can to train for that specialization within like the clinical setting. They have to go back to usually a 4-year university or a specialty teaching hospital. Okay, there's a couple questions. So Liv says, could you also specialize in a certain species? Yes, there are specializations in like zoo animal medicine, specializations in equine medicine. There are specializations in like dairy practice. So yes, there are subsets of specialties. And then what are the most important skills or qualities for this profession, from Logan? I think one of the most important things is being able to work well within a team and communicate well, because there's a lot of communication that happens in order to get treatments done on an animal on a given day, and also in order to talk to an owner through, what they want to do with their animal. What sort of testing and diagnostics they want to pursue, or what sort of preventative care they want to do. So that would be one. I also think critical thinking and attention to detail are important characteristics as well. In medicine, you really need to make sure you're not missing these tiny little details that could contribute to an animal's well-being or an animal's ability to get better or not. And and critical thinking, taking all the information and kind of putting all together and thinking about how could this be affecting this animal? What sorts of diseases might this animal have? What sorts of treatments might be appropriate? Good questions. So these are some examples of the specialties that are available in for veterinary technicians, and there are similar ones available for veterinarians as well. And I'll put that into the chat. You can go to that website. That's the National Association for Veterinary Technicians and Assistants, and that talks about the specialization process. So CVT or DVM, return on your investment. So I like to think about your education as an investment. You're investing in yourself. So yes, you're spending a lot of money typically, but what you're doing is you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your brain. You are paying someone to teach you something that you can then turn around and turn to someone else and say, hey, I know all of these things. I can do all of these things for you, but or how much are you going to pay me in order to do that? So starting salaries for veterinary technicians run somewhere between $32,000 and $48,000 a year. And those are rising relatively quickly. There's a nationwide shortage. There was a nationwide shortage of veterinarians and veterinary technicians before the pandemic. And that has only been compounded by the pandemic because everyone either bought an animal while they were at home, or they were sitting at home and they were like, I've never noticed that my animal does XYZ. I'm going to call my veterinarian and see if I can get that checked out. And so vet clinics, I don't know how many of you have tried to get your animal in for an appointment, but probably you've experienced what everyone is experiencing, which it's like months out to plan appointments or to schedule appointments sometimes. So that shortage has only been compounded by the pandemic, which is actually great for our graduates, right? Because they can go out and say, I know you need me, and this is how much I need you to pay me. So we really like that aspect of, we want there to be more vet techs, but we also like that our graduates get to have a little bit of ability to barter for higher salaries or, different benefits or things like that. Specialization does increase salary, and it just depends on the specialization and where you're working. Veterinarian starting pay runs somewhere between $65,000 and $90,000 as a starting salary. And again, specialization increases salary. And you'll notice that this range is quite wide. So we have a pretty low end and a pretty high end in both cases. And that typically, not always, but typically can be correlated to location or species seen. So the low end of the range there is typically a more rural clinic or a clinic that sees like a mixed variety of animals or large animals primarily. Whereas the higher end of that range is going to be a clinic that is in a more metropolitan area, like think Pearl District of downtown Portland, and or they see primarily companion animals like dogs and cats. So Goldilocks says, is the salary different for CVT, LVT, or RVT? No. And sorry if I wasn't clear about that earlier, but CVT, LVT, and RVT, they all mean the exact same thing. It's essentially the exact same degree. It just depends on the state in which you are licensed. Different states have written into their legislation that veterinary technicians will be called certified, or they'll be called licensed, or they'll be called registered. So we have the trifecta on the West Coast. In the state of Washington, if you graduate from a Washington school, you are considered an LVT. In the state of Oregon, you're considered a CVT. And the state of California, you're considered an RVT. So it's like very confusing. And there is, like I said, an industry push right now to try to get that nomenclature the same, because as you can imagine, it's confusing enough for us. It's also confusing for clients and people who want to start this career. They're like, it's a little bit confusing. So Angelina says, what does a typical day look like on the job from start to finish? Oh boy, that is so variable. Let me go into our next set of slides here, and then I can probably circle back to that a little bit, because this next set of slides is going to give you an idea of just how much variety there is within these degrees. So I won't forget your question, but so where can you work as a veterinarian or as a veterinary technician? This could be adapted both ways. So the place that everyone thinks that you work when you say you work in veterinary medicine is with dogs and cats. Mostly they think you're playing with puppies and kittens all day, which is sometimes true, but not always. So that is a very common thought process. And it's not necessarily untrue. A lot of graduates from veterinary schools and from veterinary technician schools end up working in small animal practices, and they work with dogs and cats every day. But there are a variety of other practices as well. So there are practices that specialize in just horses. That's literally all they see day in and day out is horses. They do, they may do farm calls for horses. They may do surgery for horses, but they only see horses. There are also practices that see only like cows, for example. So they don't see any dogs. They don't see any cats. They don't see any horses. They only see cows. There are also practices that see like exotic animals. So in the upper right hand picture here, we have rabbits and guinea pigs and ferrets and birds. There are also practices that see only birds. And then there are practices that see mixed animal, right? So they'll see the bird, they'll see the snake, they'll see the horse, they'll see the dog, they'll see the cat, they'll see the cow, they'll see the chicken, they'll see all of those things. So in general practice, there are a lot of subsets and specialty practices that you can find that, if you have a particular interest in a certain species, then likely there is a practice that does see a majority of that species. A couple questions. So Jennifer said, if you go to PCC for the 2 years and become a vet tech, can you start working right away? Yes. Yep. Most of our students actually upon graduation, because of the way that our curriculum is put together, they do 3 externships in a clinical setting as part of their education with us. And a lot of the time they end up getting job offers as a result of that and are working a day a week before they even graduate. So that has been something that the community really loves because they get, certified veterinary technicians and our students get jobs. So it works out really well. What high school and college courses have you found to be most applicable or important for your occupation? So definitely sciences, whether you're going to become a vet tech or a veterinarian, concentrate on the sciences, biology, chemistry, get good grades in those when you're in high school as well as when you're in college. And then other things like interpersonal communication classes and team building and, understanding understanding how to communicate. Those are all really important classes as well. But I would say most of the time, vet school applications and the vet tech in our vet tech program, we're concentrating a lot on those science heavy courses because it's a science-based career. Angela asks, are you able to do a mixture of certain animals? Yeah, yep. So there are clinics that do a variety of different types of animals that see all sorts of different animals. So that's one way you can work in veterinary medicine. You can also specialize. So for those of you who clicked on that link I sent, you probably saw that there were all sorts of specialties. There were specialties in dentistry. There were specialties in ophthalmology, which is eyes. There were specialties in imaging. So here we have a CT scanner. There are specialties in behavior and emergency and critical care. So these are places where, again, you're working in a practice setting, but this isn't going to be a general practice. This is going to be a place where people come when their animal has a problem with their eye. They're going to come and see you at your practice, or when your animal has a problem with their mouth and they need like a crown, like this dog here, then they're going to go and see you in that specialty practice. So a little bit of a different spin on clinical practice. Emergency and critical care is a huge part of veterinary medicine. Probably the biggest clinic we have in our area is Dove Lewis. So many people know about Dove Lewis. It's well known nationwide as an emergency and critical care location, but we also have lots of other emergency clinics that, what emergency clinics are doing is seeing animals typically after hours or that can't be seen in a general practice that need more advanced care. They need a blood transfusion. They need a certain type of surgery that can't be done in general practice. They need monitoring or medications that can't be given in a general practice. So those are going to go to an emergency hospital. So it's another place that you can work in the veterinary field. zoo medicine. So seeing all of these animals that we don't typically think of as, having, right, an owner or necessarily like a veterinary clinic that they go to. And this can be a really cool area of veterinary medicine. Sometimes you're out in the field. Sometimes you are running clinics in, like some sort of building wherever you are in the jungle. Sometimes, you're in a zoo and there is a veterinary facility. So like the Oregon Zoo, we're very lucky to have a really great veterinary facility there at the Oregon Zoo and a team of veterinarians and veterinary technicians that are taking care of the health and well-being of those animals every day. So this is a part of veterinary medicine that you can work in. Government, there's a lot of regulatory oversight in the growth of food that we eat every day. So, for those of us who eat animals, you eat chicken or you eat beef or you eat, we typically in the United States aren't eating horses or goats. So those aren't included, but I'll explain my little horse picture in a second here. Or you eat, pork products. The government does have a lot of regulatory oversight over how those animals are grown, what kind of medications they're given, what sort of disease processes we don't want to see, how we treat disease processes that we do see so that we don't have the wrong types of medications entering the food chain and potentially being ingested by humans, in which case they could potentially injure them. So this is a really important part of veterinary medicine, making sure that our food is safe. I put horses on here because there is also like a wild horse management aspect of government regulation where, we have a large population of wild horses that do need management. And that is also a part of what someone could do in, like a governmental position in veterinary medicine. The military employs veterinarians and veterinary technicians for lots of different reasons. Military working dogs is an example I have here, but there are also cavalry, there's horses that are involved in the military. There's also veterinary clinics on bases that need veterinarians and veterinary technicians to take care of the animals that are living with the families that live there on the base. So lots of different ways that way as well in veterinary medicine. Research is something that I always bring up because it is a part of veterinary medicine, and there are lots of opinions about what research is and whether it's good or whether it's bad, and everyone is welcome to have their own opinion on that. I always like to point out that, as a veterinarian or as a veterinary technician, similar to a human doctor, we take an oath at graduation. And part of the oath that we take after we've graduated from our programs or at graduation from our programs is that we will alleviate animal suffering. And in both cases, there's actually a line that talks specifically about alleviating animal suffering. That's one of the things that we are required to do in our careers. And that, that line doesn't just disappear from our oath when we decide to go and work in a research setting. And in fact, I typically argue that it becomes more important, right? Because in that environment, it's even more important that as a veterinary member, we are advocating for the animals that are being used for research and making sure that the time that they spend being used for research projects is positive, right? They're not being hurt. They're not being, they're getting the enrichment that they would normally get. They are getting the love and cuddles and care and basic medical care that they need. And I think that is something that's important to point out. So the veterinary team is still an animal advocate, even in the research setting. And in some ways that can become even more important. It kind of has nothing to do with animals at all, but all those samples I talked about, we draw blood, we draw urine, or we collect urine, we collect fecal samples, we collect tissue. All of those samples go to a lab somewhere and they're processed at that lab and they're evaluated under the microscope. And then those results are sent back to the veterinary team. And for people who are really interested in that, those sorts of things, like looking under the microscope and seeing all these cool cells and wondering, knowing what they do and how they contribute to disease or help combat disease, this can be a really cool place to work as well. So employs veterinarians and veterinary technicians. Shelter medicine, a huge part of veterinary medicine. So Oregon Humane Society, most people here have probably heard of, that's the biggest shelter in our area, but Counties also have local shelters that have full veterinary teams as well. So Bonnie Hayes, the Washington County Animal Shelter, has a veterinary team that takes care of all the animals that come into that facility. Same with Multnomah County Animal Shelter. So all the shelters now, it's very common for shelters to have veterinary teams that help contribute to the health and well-being of the animals that come in there, and then, help treat those animals and make sure that those animals are ready for adoption into a new family after they leave. Another one that I always forget is teaching. So, which is very ironic because that's what I do every day, but teaching. So if, as a veterinarian or a veterinary technician, you want to teach other veterinarians or veterinary technicians, there's absolutely space in the career for that. The vet school down at OSU employs, hundreds of veterinarians and veterinary technicians who teach new baby vets and vet techs how to be those things every day. So teaching is definitely a part of this career. And then in the state of Oregon, we have laws that were recently changed that allow veterinary technicians to own practices. So previously it was only veterinarians who could own practices, and now both vet techs and veterinarians can own practices. And for those people who are really interested in practice ownership and management and all of those aspects, this could be a really cool opportunity. So I go through this, all these different areas of where you can work in veterinary medicine, because I think it's important to highlight how broad this degree can be. So I'll go back to my story a little bit here. So, you heard me say earlier, I was going to go and treat horses for the rest of my life. And that was all I wanted to do. And so I went to vet school, and then I graduated from vet school. I wanted to specialize in, you will not be shocked, equine medicine. And I did a specialty internship for horses in medicine and surgery. And I had a 1-year really intensive post-degree training in that, and then graduated started finishing up with my internship, and actually met who is now my husband towards the end of that. And I was up in Washington, he lived down in Oregon. And I was like, oh, geez, what am I going to do? I got offered a job at the place I had done my internship. It was my dream job. I'd always wanted to work with horses. I didn't have a job in Oregon. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I really loved this person and I wanted to start a light with them. So it was really difficult. I ultimately declined the job in Washington, moved down to Oregon, couldn't find a job treating horses, which I was really bummed about. But I found a job working in small animal practice, so seeing dogs and cats every day. And I was like, okay, well, I was trained to do this in my education, so I can do this. So I started, working in small animal practice, and I enjoyed that. Probably my favorite part, honestly, was getting to know the clients, because I really like getting to know clients and talking to them about their animals and things like that. And then, treating their animals and making their animals better. And then, I worked there for a few years, and my husband and I decided that maybe we wanted to start a family. I started looking at the hours, and I had a pretty long commute. So it was going to be hard for me to sort of, balance all these different parts of having a family and trying to hold down a job and doing all these different things. And so I started looking at other parts of veterinary medicine in which I could work, and ended up finding a position as a faculty member at the vet program. And I applied for that, and I ended up getting that job. And I had always loved teaching in the clinical setting. I love teaching still in this setting. And so it was a really like a perfect way for me to be able to leverage my degree in a way that allowed me to also, build the personal life that I wanted to have as well. So I sort of lived this, this like, okay, I have one degree. I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to pay more money. I don't want to have to do something different. What can I do with the degree I already have, while also figuring out how to, live my life? So lots of different ways that you can work as a veterinarian or a veterinary technician. So that's a lot about the career. I would like to just take some, questions from you. I have some information about our program specifically, but I would rather just sort of if students have questions, I can just put our program website into the chat here and we can skip some of that. Will I go back to being an equine vet? I hope someday, yes. You know, I really am passionate about that. I'm passionate about actually, you know, large animal medicine generally, so sheep and goats as well. So yes, eventually when my kids are older, right now I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So we're a little bit busy in our house. But someday I think I will go back. Yeah. And I'll probably, I don't think I could ever leave my current position because I love the people I work with. I love the students. They're so much fun. They challenge us every day. And so I would always want to, you know, keep my foot in teaching as well. How hard is the impact on your mental health in this profession? That is an excellent question, Sierra. Yeah. So, you know, this profession, earlier today, I joked about people thinking that you just play with puppies and kittens all day and sort of insinuated that that isn't the case. And it absolutely is not the case. And there is a lot of burnout and compassion fatigue that happens in veterinary medicine. I think, you know, it is a career in which we have to make really difficult decisions with owners who are paying for things out of pocket. So insurance for pets is not very common right now, right? So it's out there, but it's not nearly as common as human medicine for humans. And so when owners come into a practice and they're trying to decide, they have a really sick animal and they're trying to decide, you know, how do I pay for all of this? They're really making a choice between, do I pay for groceries? Do I pay for my, you know, gas in my car? You know, or do I pay for these things, you know, this $1,000 bill that this veterinary clinic is telling me I need in order to get information about my animal? And that is such a difficult position for an owner to be in. And by proxy, it's a really difficult position for the veterinary team to be in because, you know, you want to do what's best for the animal, but you also have empathy for the fact that this owner is stuck in a really hard place and they have to make a really hard decision about something that they love deeply and, you know, and that emotional side of it. And also the reality of, you know, maybe not having enough money to be able to do that. So that can be really hard. Euthanasia is another thing that, you know, I think it can be a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. So, you know, in veterinary medicine, we have the ability to euthanize animals, which means to basically give them medications that stop their heart. And that can be really wonderful in some ways. So if we have an animal who's really suffering, who has a disease process that can't be fixed or that owners cannot pay to be fixed, for example, rather than having that animal continue to be in pain and feel poorly and suffer, we have the opportunity to be able to end that suffering by euthanizing them. And at the same time, as you can all imagine, that is not a decision that owners take lightly, and it's not a decision that the veterinary team takes lightly. And so that too can take a big toll on people in the profession. So there's a big push profession-wide to, first of all, recognize, talk about, and verbalize all these things, right? Because that's the first step with any of this stuff, is saying, hey, look, this happened and this is really hard. Let's talk about how hard it is and how it makes us feel. And now let's talk about ways that we can help heal those things or set boundaries in certain ways or recognize when it's really getting to us. So I've been really happy to see that sort of a big wave of change happen in our industry that way, because I think for a long time it just was there and nobody really talked about it and everybody really struggled with it. And now everybody struggles with it, but we all talk about it and there's a whole lot of support within the industry that way. So anyways, sorry, long answer to a quick question. Hopefully that answered your question, Sierra. What advice would you give to someone just starting out? Jada, I think the most important thing you can do is spend some time in a veterinary clinic and watch what the people are doing in that veterinary clinic, talk to them about what they're doing, talk to them about what they love about their job, what they don't love about their job, how did they get here, do they want to stay here, why don't they want to stay here, or why will they never leave, right? So really starting to get some information from them about, all of, what they did, what their path was, and what their career is like for them. I think that's the best thing for you to do when you're just starting out. And then, do you need to have good grades in high school to get into vet school? Goldilocks, it is, or Goldie, it is, I think, not as important as getting good grades in college. Even to get into our vet tech program, typically, we will look at your high school transcripts, but we don't put a whole lot of weight on high school grades. If you're straight Fs, then we're going to probably be talking, but I think there is something to be said for someone getting into college, recognizing the path that they want to go, and then feeling that passion and that drive to really learn the information and that excitement to learn that information, which is sometimes not always felt as much in high school, because you're just trying to figure out, like, what am I doing and where do I want to go? And you're dabbling in all sorts of different things. So I always say, try to get as good of grades as you can, because good grades are always going to set you up well anyways. But I think in college, definitely that's where a lot of the GPA and the grades are going to be, when you're applying, those schools are going to be focused on. And to add to that, some of the education you're going to get in high school is going to set you up for that. So like your high school biology courses are going to set you up to know the basic cellular functions and information that you need to know for your college level biology courses. And same with chemistry, and same with math, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Cassie said, does the study of zoology fall under veterinary medicine? Yeah, Cassie. So a lot of applicants who are applying as veterinary technicians or veterinarians may have already gotten a degree or pursued some classes in zoology, because it's a very similar area of study. And Jennifer asks, do you need to go into vet school with some knowledge of things / science, or can you go without any knowledge? Yeah, so Jennifer, for vet school, you have to have an undergraduate degree, so a 4-year bachelor's degree. Typically in a science is what people choose, just because the prerequisite courses for the veterinary school are very science heavy. So instead of being like an art major where you pay for all the art courses and then also pay for all these additional science courses, most people are just, they do a science major, like a bachelor's degree in biology, or in my case, I did a bachelor's degree in animal science. And that sort of is 2 birds with 1 stone, getting all the prerequisites and also getting a degree. But you don't necessarily have to have that. There are people who apply to vet school and have a degree in sociology or, humanities or something, and they've just also then done all the science prerequisite course requirements. Are there opportunities for growth in this career? Yeah. So Angelina, I think, the idea that you could graduate, say I want to work with dogs and cats, and then you get out, you work with dogs and cats for a while, and you decide, I'm kind of tired of working with dogs and cats. I think I want to work with lab animals, or I want to work with exotic animals, or I want to specialize. There are opportunities to do that in this career, where you can change your career trajectory, or focus on something you're really interested in. Maybe it's behavior, and kind of become an expert on those sorts of things in the field. So I will put into the chat here our homepage. So this goes into sort of our program a little bit, and what our program looks like. And then PCC has sort of a funky way of doing their pages now. So I'm also going to put into the chat our overview page, which isn't as easy to get to with just a plain Google search, but has, I think, more information that might be appropriate for you who are kind of looking, if you're looking at our program. So you can look through that and look at our facilities. We have a full working farm on campus. So we calve out a herd of cows, and we lamb a herd of sheep every year. And our students are involved in that from start to finish. We also have, yeah, good question, Goldie. Our program is on the Rock Creek campus. So just for those of you, I think everybody is in kind of this area, but out 185th off of Highway 26 there. We also have a kennel where we house the dogs and cats that, we use for teaching, and our students are in, when you're learning how to draw blood on a dog, you're also learning how to draw blood on a cat and on a chicken and on a horse and on a sheep and on a cow. So we really have a hands-on sort of all-encompassing approach to teaching at the vet tech program. Really good question. Does PCC offer tours for the vet tech program? So right now, PCC, because of COVID, is in like a very odd opening stage where they've sort of done a staged reopening, and they're sequentially allowing more and more people on campus. So right now there are no tours allowed, but starting in spring, we've been told that we will be able to start having, people back on campus. I used to do an information session every month, and we would do a tour after the information session every month. So I'll probably start those again. So stay tuned and get in touch if you need any information about, that as we get closer to spring. What other questions? I'm pretty close on time there, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you guys have any more questions, just put it in the chat. Oh, I have one more question. Do you own a pet, Dr. Berzek?
Oh man. Well, I had 2 dogs and a cat, and they all died during COVID. It was awful. So they were all old. It was time for them all to go. But yeah, the good old pandemic strikes again. So we don't have any animals right now. I think our family is going to take a pause on animals till our kids are a little bit older and can help us a little bit more with care. But it does feel odd having had a dog for so long, at least one dog for so long, and then having no animals. So.
All right. So thank you so much for all the knowledge that the students get today.
Absolutely.
And we're hoping to get a tour and at PCC when everything is open.
I know, me too. We used to do some cool stuff with this group, so we'll get back there. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.